نعم. انتوا طبعا خبراء، انتوا جربتوا الصوت يعني بحيث يكون عالي كفايه وبعدين ماشي كويس كده. نعم. لا اتفضل، دي ليست لي، انما لو عايز تشيلها. نبتدي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على خاتم النبيين والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. من مسجد الأمة نحييكم جميعا، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. في الجمعة الماضية تعرضنا أو سجلنا الحلقة 12 من مسلسلة الأسرة في الإسلام، ونعتذر للإخوة والأخوات جميعا لأنه كان عندنا يبدو مشكلة في الصوت، ولذلك يعني أقترح على حضراتكم that my suggestion, because of the sound problem in the 12th halaqa that was taped last Friday, I thought that it would be a useful idea to repeat it, because with sound, very difficult sound, it may not be useful, and I didn't want to break the sequence of this halaqa. The only brothers and or sisters that I have to apologize especially to them are those who are attending here, who attended last Friday, because of repeating basically the same halaqa. But as you know, the audience or viewers of these halaqat go by far beyond those who might be present here in Masjid al-Ummah. There are those who watch it live in the direct feed, and there are people also from other cities and even countries who also watch these halaqat. So forgive me for that repetition, and inshallah I'll make an announcement also concerning the next 4 Fridays that I'll be away, inshallah. So that I'll keep until the end of the halaqah. The time really is quite limited, so in my repeating of the previous halaqah on Friday, inshallah I'll try to make it more concise and more brief. And if we have time, even I might add something we didn't cover last time concerning the hadana, the guardianship in case of divorce. Now, we were continuing with the dissolution of marriage. We spent quite some time on it in the previous halaqas. But when we came to deal with the rights and responsibilities and entitlements for both sides, we covered only 2 forms. The third form is called khul'a in Arabic, kha, lam, ain, or in English, K-H-U-L, and then apostrophe, khul'a. This is the case where a husband does not single-handedly divorce his wife. And when the husband is not failing his duties toward his wife in terms of spending and good treatment, but the wife somehow finds it very difficult to continue life with him. And I think the best way to describe it, as it happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that a woman came to him and she said, you know, I saw my husband along with other people also, like traveling with him or coming with him, and somehow she expressed her dislike of her husband. It could be something that developed later on, Allah knows. And she said, Ya Rasulullah, O Prophet of Allah, I do not want to be in a position where I'm afraid to slip in something wrong. So this is a case of no fault, so the husband is not divorcing. The husband did not do something wrong so that the wife can go to the judge and says he mistreated me and he refuses divorce. So the judge can rule, of course, marriage dissolved even if the husband refuses. It's called at-talaq lil-darar, because of hurt or irresponsibility on the part of the husband. So these categories are different. The khul'a then is what you might call no fault on the part of the husband, because that's what the lady said, I cannot criticize my husband either in his deen, his observant, or his character. But somehow she couldn't imagine herself continuing life with that. Sometimes this could be because of maybe private reasons that she doesn't want to disclose, and it is not good enough reason that the judge can rule marriage dissolved. So what the Prophet ﷺ did, and this is the basic ruling, and what to do in cases like this. He said to her, are you willing to return to him his orchard, meaning that the husband gave her as a marital gift, a piece of land or garden, an orchard. So the lady said, yes, I am. So the husband apparently was reluctant. He didn't want to divorce. So the Prophet ﷺ ordered him. He said, take back the orchard and give her a divorce. خذ الحديقة وطلقها تطليقا. So that was the ruling of the Prophet ﷺ. On the basis of that, the Muslim scholars, the jurists, fuqaha, they say, in the case of khul'a, it is best that the husband and wife agree on compensation. Why compensation? Well, because when the husband got married, he paid mahr or marital gift, whether it was all paid at once or part of it paid and part deferred, or it could be he committed himself to give a given amount of mahr later on. So in this case, the husband would be at a disadvantage because there is no fault religiously, there is no fault in his duties, but simply that the wife cannot stand him for some reason or the other. So she should be willing to return what he paid her. Because when all of the gifts and mahr, marital gift, was given, it was given with the assumption that it is a lasting marriage, not that the wife after a few days says, no, I don't like you, you're okay, but I have to keep everything. So fairness in Islam is independent of gender or race or any other considerations. Justice to the husband and justice to the wife, and that is the way. We also indicated that if, for example, the husband has given his wife already some gifts, it is best actually that she return it if it is valuable, like giving her, for example, other than the marital gift, some valuable items like jewelry or gold or whatever. She should also be returning that to him. But small things like clothing items or food, of course, there's no way or need for recovery. And we refer actually to the Quran for this, the ayah that speaks about khul'a, even though the term is not used explicitly. The Quran says, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا فِي مَا افْتَدَتْ بِهِ. In a case like this, that is descriptive of the khul'a, there is no blame on them, meaning husband and wife, in whatever they agree to, which means he could have the right to demand all what he gave to her, and still she has it. Okay? But it is good also that they agree, for example, that something would be left to her, and that actually would be better in terms of Islamic character. So he might say that I'm entitled to all of these, but okay, keep the gold gifts or something, but the marital gift. Some people say, but when the ayah says there is no blame on them in what they agree to, can the husband demand something more than the marital gift? If you look at it literally, without reasoning, just literally, you'd say, okay, the ayah is open, which means if he demands more and she agrees to give him, that's fine. But ethically speaking, this is supposed to be compensation, not a way of extortion. For example, if the husband who's refusing to divorce his wife and tells her, all right, I give you a mahr 10,000, but if you give me 10 million, I agree to khula. That could be ibtizaz. This is extortion. Not. So I mean within limited scope, whatever they agree to without any pressure on one side or the other, then this is okay. So that's one. Some question, a side question sometimes is related to that. If a wife is the one who's asking for khul, distribution of money, what is the period of her iddah, the waiting period before she remarries? Now, mind you, most periods of iddah, a waiting period between utterance of divorce or agreement, in that case, to end the marriage, and the wife, after that, might be eligible or want to get married to someone else. Usually it is about 3 months, and we explained in the previous segment of this series some of the reason or hikmah being a cooling off period, making sure whether she's pregnant or not, even though you don't need 3 months for that. But the combination of those reasons make this waiting period a helpful thing. Does that apply to the case of khula? No. On the authority of the Prophet ﷺ, as was reported, in the case of khula, that woman that I mentioned before, the waiting period is only approximately 1 month. In other words, once she gets her cycle, for example, and so on, it's about a month or so, and there is no pregnancy. Of course, in that case, the waiting period would be only 1 month or 1 cycle for that. So that's the one difference from the normal type of divorce. But of course, there may be good reason for that. You see, in revocable divorce, a person divorces his wife, but within the 3 months maximum period or so, he can retain his wife or revoke his divorce. But this is a case where a woman say, I can't stand him, for example. I can't imagine myself living happy with that man, even though there is no fault in terms of legal obligation. But so because of that, it's not like waiting for 3 months. It becomes, khalas, one iddah, and she's free to remarry if she wants. This is the third form. The fourth form of divorce or dissolution of marriage, to be more accurate, is called fasakh, meaning in English annulment or voiding, to void or annul something. This happens in a case where the contract itself was void in the first place. In other words, it's not that they married a marriage that is acceptable in terms of its condition in Sharia, offer and acceptance and all the other conditions. So the marriage if the marriage was valid at that time, then you don't talk about fasakh. You talk about divorce. You talk about ending an existing contract which is otherwise legal. The case of fasakh or annulment is where the contract did not meet its conditions or violated a serious condition. Okay. Yes, it is void now, not that it's ended, it is void. An example of that, somebody gets married to a lady to discover in the future, not by design, to discover in the future that she was his sister in suckling, they suckled from the same mother, or maybe in some rare cases it might be his own blood sister, but because of war situation or whatever, nobody found out where the other is, so she to him was just like any other lady. He never realized that this is his sister. She never realized that this is her brother in blood or in suckling for rada'. In that case, it was wrong to have that contract. So when that is ended now, it is not ended in the normal way. Actually, it is called annulment, that the original contract itself was wrong and was valid. There could be another case, nothing to do with being brothers and sisters. For example, a person gets married to a woman who is a believer in Islam, but Allah forbid that it happens that she apostated, left Islam, for example. Now, marriage regulations in Islam or laws is that neither male or female can marry an apostate or a mushrik, idolatrous person, for example. So now, when the contract was negotiated, when marriage took place, it was valid. It met all the reasons. But now, once the wife or husband, for that matter, so it's either husband or wife apostated, for example, then the other one, a believing side, is no longer obligated to continue with that marriage, and it is not really a regular divorce. Actually, they consider it also fasq, that by virtue of her getting out of Islam or him apostating from Islam, then the contract can be annulled. So there are limited cases, like I say, where this would be. All right. What are the effects of annulment? Well, it depends. If annulment of the contract, like the case of marrying one sister without realizing this, if that happened before marriage is consummated, or dukhla, when people move to their own household, the jurists say that a woman would not be entitled to anything. She's not losing anything, but simply realizing that this is a wrong marriage, so there's nothing. Even if he promised to give marital gift, it is not valid anymore, because that was a promise on the assumption that there is nothing wrong with the contract itself, which it was. Okay. If marriage was consummated, the ruling, again, before is to have or to pay 1/2 of that marital gift, and if there was no agreement on the amount of marital gift, then it would be the average for a person in her social, status, financial status. It is something that people also can compensate. And actually, one way of compensation that's quite legitimate is known as mut'a, because we spoke about that also in the 11th segment of this series, that aside from payment to the divorced wife to suckle her baby, he would have to pay her to support her for suckling the baby, even after divorce, in addition to any other entitlement like deferred dower or mahr. That there is also mention in the Quran about mut'a, matti'uhunna, give something extra beyond that. Some take it as mandatory. Most take it as desirable thing, and it should be part of good character to have that additional compensation after ending marriage. There is a fourth method that's not as familiar to many people, but it is valid actually from Sharia standpoint, and which would be the equivalent also of unilateral divorce. We spoke in the first form that the husband unilaterally divorces his wife. But the opposite also is possible, but with one condition. A wife also can unilaterally divorce her husband, but only with one of two conditions, not both. One would be enough. The first one is that at the time of marriage, her marital contract, or she demanded and he agreed in the marital contract that she will have the right, if not happy with him, to divorce, to initiate divorce. In other words, a wife also could divorce her husband. That's one condition. Either that, or if the husband, even after marriage, it was not in the contract, and she spoke to him, she expressed how miserable or unhappy or whatever, and the husband say, all right, I'm not going to force you to live with me. So, amruki ilayk. She say, I make tafweed, I authorize you, if now or after you think sometimes you want to divorce me, I'll accept that. So in that case, he delegated his authority to divorce his wife to his wife, who can divorce him. So that's also a valid one. And finally, we can say also, even though it's still not totally different from previous forms, is by agreement. It's not that the husband say, okay, I'm unhappy and this, I divorce you, or if she has one of the two conditions, but I divorce you, it is not khul, it is not annulment of the contract, but they just talk together in courtesy, without animosity. And they say, okay, we both agree now that we're not a good match. Okay, so let us separate. Everyone goes his way, but in courtesy, and any other financial entitlement by one side or the other has to be taken care of. And the Quran actually emphasized that even in the sad case of ending the marriage, أمسكوهن بمعروف أو سرحوهن بمعروف. Either you keep your wives, keep the marital relationship and live in a decent and fair manner with one another, or if you have to separate also in courtesy with no animosity. So like I said, it's not exactly a different one, but it is better than one side or the other initiate or challenge or go to court. It is a valid way. Now, we'll add a couple of points, inshallah, of contemporary issues, especially for Muslim numerical minorities in countries which are not ruled by Sharia, or most of the secular societies, as you might call it, but mostly, I would say, in what is called liberal democracies and so on, which are supposed to be not supporting religion, but not opposing religion. In other words, they respect the right of people and their religious choices, which, by the way, is now very common in many Western countries and other countries for that matter, and it is part of the international laws also pertaining to the so-called human rights. With this situation, a question comes quite frequently. I have been personally asked that from many sisters when I was in the US, here in Canada, when I traveled in Europe. And that issue was addressed finally. I was giving them an answer, alhamdulillah, that turned out to be a correct one by scholars who are, I consider, their student really. If a woman, for example, to give you the scenario, want to get divorced. For example, her husband is abusing her, and as you mentioned earlier, abuse is not only physical or psychological for that matter, like sibab, calling her names, call her parents' names, and it's something that only comes from someone who doesn't have the least requirement of a true Muslim. And she says, I want you to divorce me. He says, no, I'm not. And sometimes, in fact, the husband may be doing that to put his wife into misery. Okay? So he doesn't want, I'm not divorcing. Then she says, all right, in Sharia, like we spoke about one form before, I could go to the judge to rule marriage void. But that actually is in the context of a Muslim country that apply Sharia, not claiming to apply Sharia, really apply Sharia. Or at least, if they're not applying it in every respect, like some Muslim countries, they respect the rules of Sharia concerning the so-called personal law, like marriage, divorce, custody, inheritance. So if there is such a situation, usually they have a Sharia judge who is conversant with Sharia and also has ability as a judge to know how to evaluate various disputes coming before him. But then we can't help people solve their problem practically. Say, Ya ukhti, my sister, go to a Sharia judge. Where is a Sharia judge? In Canada, United States, or Britain. Even in Britain, which is a little bit more tolerant than many other Western countries, you can't allow in any country two parallel laws. You see what I mean? You don't say, all right, Muslims also have every right to have their own judge, which is enforceable legally. Whatever he rules would be enforceable legally. That doesn't happen. So what they do in Britain, and that's a good practice, still they hold the position that there's only one law, the law of the country. And the judge, whoever his religion or background, is the judge whose ruling should be respected. But because of tolerance and respect of religions, some of them actually, whenever they have a case that pertains to Muslims, they consult, sometimes get a report from, there is a Sharia council. It's more like an advisory council in UK. And the idea behind that is not just to be tolerant of Muslims, but you see, in the judicial system, a good judge would consider in his or her ruling the social and cultural background of people, not to make them ahead of law, but to consider this as one element, because the judge is supposed to bring a ruling that would be, if possible at all, as much compatible and acceptable by both sides as possible. But that's only consultation. But he is not, the judge is not a Sharia law. Scholars in Britain who are in this council are not judges ruling with binding force of that ruling. So we have to be practical, and that's why the European Council Fatwa research that deal most extensively for many years with this Muslims living in non-Muslim countries. So that Sharia judge is not there. Now, is a woman then stuck? Her husband is refusing to divorce her. Even if she offer him khula, he's not, because he wants to hurt her, almost like hold her, which is forbidden, by the way, in the Quran, to just hurt the wife, to force her to leave her right. So if the only way for her to get out of this is to go to a secular judge, is that divorce, if the judge granted valid? The position of the European Council of Fatwa and Research is that, number one, Muslims should try their best to resolve their problems, if there is no Sharia law, among themselves as Muslims. They could have a process of conciliation, binding arbitration by a council of elderly or imams in a given area, and that would actually help them both. But let's be practical. This would work only if both sides to the marriage are committed Muslims. Suppose she wants to get out and get it according to the Sharia requirement, and he refuses. That means forever she cannot really obtain a divorce. So it is in that case that they said, only if this is not possible, you have to try that first. If it is totally impossible, but to go to the so-called secular law, it is by exception, not a rule, then the ruling of that judge would be accepted. And two basic arguments were made in favor of that. Number one, they say if that brother and sister married, for example, in one case at least, are married here in Canada, by officiating your marriage, official marriage, which is now, by the way, for example, Nova Scotia, nobody can conduct any marriage except the official marriage. You can combine Sharia official, and there are people who are recognized as marriage officers. I happen to be one, for example. So the signature of the marriage officer means it is both Sharia as well as secular. So they don't make that distinction, but it meets the same kind of requirement. That's one. So they say that in a case like that, when you officiate your marriage under, let's say, Canadian law, and if it's pertaining to marriage, it could be provincial law. Once you officiate that, you recognized tacitly, more than tacitly, that this ruling of the judge, or because you can also go to justice of peace to marry, for example, that you recognize marriage through that judge or whoever takes his role. It follows then that you tacitly accept that if your marriage is going to be dissolved, then you have also to dissolve your marriage according to the law of that country. You don't just make it marry according to one law and divorce under another law. This is a good point, however. There are cases where perhaps marriage might have taken place in some other country. And now there is no possibility. If there is possibility that they both go to that country and she goes to the judge and complain that she can get a Sharia, go to some Muslim country where there is a Sharia court, what will happen? She's stuck. So the second argument, which is actually, I find very interesting and more powerful even, and apply to all cases, is that even under secular law, because you cannot force the country to change to Sharia law, it's impossible practically, and you're not required to change the country, again, is the will of the majority. But let's be fair also, because sometimes people have a notion that this is kufr system, this is iman system. Even in secular system, in liberal democracy, Muslims have the rights, generally speaking, with some flaws, generally speaking, more than their freedom in some Muslim countries. I always give an example. You go to some countries, if you stand after Salah, just take permission from the Imam, like microphone, some tablighi brother, passing by, and stand and share a hadith with the audience, brothers and sisters, say something to remind people of their deen. You will not be arrested or worse. You're free. If you're an Islamic organization and the number of Muslims in that country is 0.5% of the population, you go freely to ask for place in the university or rent a hall. You can say what you want. Nobody will prevent or interfere with what you're doing. So we have to recognize, yes, the negative thing in non-Muslim society, but the positive things which are originally Islamic but Muslims apparently gave up or did not follow it properly. Take the question of marriage. It is a rukn. It is a prerequisite for validity of marriage that there will be an offer and acceptance, which means there is free will on the part of husband and wife. Nobody can force them, intimidate them, twist their arms to marry the other spouse. And that's an Islamic principle. That is also a legal principle. And I haven't seen even the marriage form that I sign when I officiate marriages of people. You get both sides to accept and they sign. Secondly, in Sharia, you need at least 2 witnesses. In Shahada in general, but it is better to announce more. But the minimum is to have 2 witnesses. This is exactly, subhanAllah, in Nova Scotia, in the marriage certificate, it has signature of both sides and also signatures of 2 witnesses. And of course you can say all people who are here are witnesses, but for the sake of writing, which is encouraged in contracts in Islam, 2 witnesses. So it's almost identical requirement, except that of course you make it in the name of Allah, and you may probably add the notion or the condition of mahr, or marital gift, because they don't know about it, but you can have either a side paper on that, or it could be declared or not declared. It's not a big problem. So I think this is even, and also what is the purpose of the judicial system? In general, you find people who are corrupt, like you find in Muslim countries also. Just there are all kind of people. But the purpose, normatively, of judicial system is to achieve what? Justice. Justice. Somebody alleges, he owes me that much, the other person denies, and so on. Okay? What is the judge doing? He's trying to be as fair as possible, listen to the evidence, listen to rebuttal, with or without lawyers representing either or both sides. Justice. And, alhamdulillah, I think some of you might have, and if not, please listen to it on the internet under Ummah Masjid videos, either Facebook or otherwise. Our beloved Imam, Sheikh Abdullah Yusuf, spoke also about this notion of justice versus zulm, or unfairness or injustice, and that justice is the haqq on which the heaven and earth were established by or created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So many excellent examples from Quran and Hadith were given. So if that is the ideal of any judicial system, it is even more than ideal, actually, when you talk about Islam, where the motive also is not just doing justice for the sake of it or mechanically, but because you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here again, there is some similarity in terms of the objective of the judicial system. Another issue that came to the Council for decision: can a woman seek divorce of her husband or divorce from her husband, whatever other form of marriage dissolution, if her husband is quote unquote fasiq? Fasiq actually is like someone who deviates from the way. But fasiq does not mean kafir. This is something that some people mix up. Yani away from the way of Islam in terms of aqidah, belief, of course, a fasiq then would be also not just fasiq but kafir, outside of the realm of Islam. But usually, if you look at the Quranic usage and the hadith usage of that, fasiq is one who still accepts Islam, but he's doing something wrong, okay? Short of shirk. And I say short of shirk because the Quran in more than one place says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah will never forgive or accept repentance of anyone who commits shirk, meaning to join partners with Allah in worship. Shirk aqidah. That they say, for example, Allah is Allah, but also some of His creatures share His divinity and we should worship both of them or one and the other. That's form of shirk. But then it says, but Allah will be willing to forgive anything short of that. Which means a person who's fasiq, there are degrees. There are degrees, even though they still profess to be Muslims. So after discussions and attempt to clarify that issue, let me get you the talaq min fasiq. Yeah, because this is a critical one. All right. Okay, the first part I mentioned already about the purpose. Yeah. Okay. It says in a brief way, Zawaj is a solemn commitment, mithaqan ghalidan, as the Quran calls it. It is a sacred tie combining together, joining a man and a woman according to the book of Allah and the sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which make them really like the Quran describe it like a garment of one another. Each one is the garment for the other, which has a very nice meeting. We explained it in a previous session. And it is a duty of both spouses to live in kindness with his or her spouse. And it is not permissible for the husband to divorce his wife with the purpose of breaking her heart and all of that. And then when it comes to the question of fisq, is that a reason for a woman to ask for divorce? This is the critical paragraph that's coming. There is no doubt that people who are fasiqs differ in the degree of their fisq and in the way they treat their wives. Then it says, some of the husbands may want from his wife to help him in fisq. For example, he drinks. He's a Muslim. Haram, drink is haram. Yes, no question about that. But it doesn't make him a kafir unless he says, no, it is not haram, knowingly. But if he tells his wife doesn't drink, she's a good woman, say, serve me wine. Or to have guests and say, bring the wine here. Now, any person who has the basic knowledge of Islam knows that as the Prophet ﷺ, that there are 10 categories that has been cursed by Allah in the matter of intoxicants. And that includes hamilaha wal mahmul, not only the one who drinks or makes it or sell it or carry it, the one who serves that. Now, that is haram. That wife then could ask if he doesn't keep insisting on that and intimidating her to do the wrong. It is permissible for her to seek divorce because she will be a partner in the ithm, in the sin, by even serving her. So that's one case. Notice here about the precision. It says, but some husbands also do not treat their wives kindly. They hurt her ila akhirah. This gives her also the right to seek divorce, especially if the husband is constantly doing that. In other words, if he's not only hurting her once or twice, he's just persistent abuser. And she concluded that while she prayed that Allah will guide him, in fact, he is not. He does not seem to be really at the time willing, to improve his ways or repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that also she has a right, but give a chance for tawbah, give a chance for advice, counseling, and so on. But she has a right. Then it says there are other husbands who are not doing this or that, not the two categories we spoke about. He treats her kindly. This, the jurists differ as to what will happen. Take, for example, the case of a person who does not or neglect his prayer. They made a distinction, and that's the correct opinion. If he is not praying out of laziness, but he admits and says, maybe Allah will guide me, I'll pray. He might die before that. But anyway, see, but he does not deny that salah is fard. But he says, I'm busy, I'm the one who's wrong. Or I am drinking, and I know it's wrong, maybe Allah will guide me someday, whatever. This is a person is disobedient to Allah, but not apostate, not kafir. So there are other opinions that's more strict that say even a person is lazy in prayer, is kafir. So those people would say, no, he's a kafir, he should pray. I think the first opinion is the more correct one in terms of lots of opinions of scholars like Sayyid Sabiq and others, that a person who's not denying that salah is fard still is a Muslim, even though he's committing a major sin. So this is perhaps, are we in Asha already? Asha time? Okay. Inshallah, we finished a lot of this already. There's only a tiny bit, but this is where I come to the announcement. There's little remaining in marriage dissolution, and after that, as part of dealing with the family, inshallah, we'll take a few sessions maybe on children and youth and their rights and the mutual rights between parents and children. But I'm just making an announcement that I regret that I will not have the honor and barakah of being with you for the next 4 Fridays, because inshallah I have a long trip for Islamic conferences in Istanbul, inshallah, from the 1st of November, that's this Thursday, inshallah, and coming back on the 19th of November, and after 2 days, the following Thursday, I have another commitment in Vancouver, so a total of 4 Fridays I'm missing this barakah. I have spoken with our Imam, Sheikh Abdullah, Jazawullah Khairan, that there are some previous programs, you might select some of them if you wish, if some audience, whether here or elsewhere, are interested. So you might have repeat of some function of a couple of times, like 4 Fridays, in another related or different topics, inshallah. Jazakum Allah khairan, and inshallah I try to make dua in my travel for you as the Prophet recommended, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but you make dua for me also. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Please notice that the time, there is a special schedule for prayers. Next week still might be about the same time, about November 2nd, about 6:30. But from November 9, that would be when the time, November 9 still, I believe. November 9, that's when the clock will go back 1 hour. In which case, the halaqah will be after Isha, because Isha, for example, on the 9th of November, Isha will be 6:17. So after Isha, maybe 6:30 or whatever, you decide, or the Sheikh decide, would be the halaqah. From November 9th until the end of December, it would be after Isha prayer. Jazakum Allah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. الله يكرمك، تفضل. تفضل، عايز تأذن؟
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.